You know, I've had a wonderful set of life experiences and I'm so grateful. One evening, when we were living in Russell, my husband jumped up at the TV, looking at something at the TV, and it was a yacht. And he said, "Adele, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I want to do." So we set to and bought a yacht from some people down south, and her name was Aradonna. And anyway, so we set off on a regatta that left alternately to Tonga and Fiji each year. And that particular year we were going to Fiji. And the following year we carried on and went to Tonga. But that time we continued on westward. So we continued to Fiji and then New Caledonia. And he said to me, "Well, Adele, we're not that far away from Australia, so why don't we carry on to Australia?" So I thought, oh, well, okay, that'll be okay. And so we carried on to Australia, and then we went over the top of Australia and up to Indonesia, and we just continued on sailing until we sailed right round the world. The circumnavigation took about 6 years, but we were flying home every 6 months. And so that broke it for us, and to see the family, you know, for big events like weddings and things. And but yes, some of the experiences we had were very, very frightening. But somehow or other, you just keep control of yourself. You don't fall apart. You just have to deal with it. Things happened. Things definitely happened, and we were often well, not often, but sometimes without power. And I remember once when we were sailing towards the Galapagos Islands, we had no power whatsoever. So we didn't even have lights or anything. And we eventually got into this little anchorage and dropped the anchor. Oh, it was such a relief. Well, that very night, we were fast asleep when all of a sudden, with an enormous crashing noise, Aradonna went over onto her side like that, completely over to her side. And I leapt out of my bunk and I said, "Rodney, we're in the middle of a tsunami." And he said, no, he said, "We're not. Another boat has crashed into us." And that's what had happened. This boat had crashed into us, and there was a lot of swearing going on, and because they didn't expect to see anybody there. And of course we had no power, so there were no lights. And anyway, he took off. Didn't wait to see if we were injured or anything like that. We never saw him again after that. I think he was too ashamed to come back again. But that was an awful experience. That was a real humdinger. Rodney fell overboard in the Caribbean when I had asked him earlier on if there were sharks in the Caribbean. And he said, no, there aren't any sharks here. And anyway, he was doing a very silly thing. He was trying to get into the inflatable dinghy while the boat was actually while the yacht was moving, and he fell in between the yacht and the dinghy, and he shouted, "Adele!" at the top of his voice, "Adele!" And so I managed to stop. We were motoring at the time, and I managed to stop the yacht and turn around, and I thought, I'll just teach him a lesson here. I'll just not hurry. And anyway, he was swimming like a maniac to get back, and he finally got back. And I've learnt since there are sharks in the Caribbean, and I don't know what I would have done if he'd been taken by one. We didn't have any rows apart from on our very last day, believe it or not. When we arrived back in New Zealand, and the family were all, you know, waving at us from the shore, but we couldn't stop. We couldn't stop because we had to check in with customs before we saw them. And they had a lovely roast dinner cooking there, but that night we actually had to go to Opua and stay there. And it was the most silly thing that we actually had the biggest row of our entire circumnavigation that night on our way to Opua. But I suppose it was just letting off steam.